Hey, and welcome back to Quiz the Whiz, here with your host, Tim Aiken, and our resident whiz, Susie Bowen. Uh, we are super excited to be back with you, and I can tell she's already mad about me calling her the whiz.
Yep.
But we are super glad to be back with you. Kind of surprised they let us come back and do a second episode, if we're being completely honest. Obviously, they didn't listen to us internally. What do you think, Susie?
Yeah, definitely not, because we are quite the jokesters.
Yeah, yeah, we do like to have fun. But we've got a good episode for you today, and obviously we like to build these off of what questions you guys have. And so, Susie, how would they keep getting us some info here?
Yeah, so we're going to provide you with an email address at the end of this presentation, and you can email with any questions that you might have. We love to get those questions from you. It really helps us to understand what your pain points are and help us to dig into something that's really fun. So definitely send something, challenging and fun over to us. Anything that you're stuck with, we'll come up with our own ideas if we need to, but we prefer to have yours given to us. Um, and just a quick side note on here, like Tim mentioned, I am not the Whiz, and we are the Whiz together. But unfortunately, I told Tim right before we started recording that he had his picture and name on every single one of the slides because he had done a copy and paste. And I'm really disappointed that I let him know that because that would have been great to have. He's got my big picture on here, but then his picture on every single slide. So we
It
know
was
the
not a good
truth.
look. It
We
was
know the
not a good
truth.
look.
Oh,
Yeah,
it
I'm
was.
glad
It
you
was pretty.
pointed it out.
I'm very sad. So, anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for providing questions to us. And please do provide more questions because that's how we're determining what to talk about. So, with that being said, we're going to start on our uh, question for today.
Yep. So our question this week is from Inga down at Lucidian. And her question was, how can I initiate the read and understood automatically after the revision is published? Would it be a workflow or as a setting under the document properties? And this is such a good question. And we always, this is, for me, I'm a little bit more on the sales side. Susie works more on the account side, and I guarantee you we get this in all different types of flavors
Yep.
all the time. People trying to accomplish just this thing. So we thought it was good. One, because it's a common question we get, but then also it's just there's so many different types of ways that you can do this depending on what you're trying to do. So in typical Tim and Susie fashion, which if there are people out there that have worked with us before, you'll completely understand this. But we overthought this to the max. If you could possibly come up with more solutions to this particular problem, we definitely found all of them. So
Yeah.
um, we'll go through a whole bunch of different options for how you can do this, both on the very easy, kind of out of the box way to do something, or the more complex way if that's just not really going to work for you. Um, so with that in mind, we're going to start in a couple of areas and by giving you guys a little bit of insight into how we thought about it. So the first thing that we're going to look at is, are we specifically talking pre-publication of a document or post-publication of a document, right? Because that can vary depending on your particular needs for your company. So if we need it to be done before a document is published or a revision is published, how would we accomplish that? If we need it to happen after, or if we're okay with it happening after, how would we accomplish that? And we'll show you guys various options for both of those scenarios.
Specifically, we want to give you a little bit of background too, because in all of this, we're going to be talking about, multiple different areas of the product, workflows, and document control. We're also going to be talking about tests and trainings. So because of that, we wanted to give you a little bit of explanation in case you're not as familiar with those, but even if you are, just to give you a little bit of an explanation of where we're coming from, why we're choosing to use tests or trainings in different scenarios here. So For testing, when we are talking about testing within the product, we are talking about, obviously true, false, yes, no, multiple choice types of tests where you need to complete those in order to be successful in completion. Um, we're talking specifically because you can tie a document to a test, and you can also tie a document to a training. But with tests, you can tie them to an actual publication of a test. I'm sorry, of a document. So when you have a document that gets published, you can have a test automatically sent out to them with every published revision or with just that published revision. So the reason for that is we usually are talking about document acknowledgements or attestations, and we're using testing for that purpose because of the fact that it can be um, sent out automatically, no manual need to get involved with every published version. Whereas with trainings, you're just showing that an individual has completed a training. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, because there might be places where you do want to incorporate actually training someone on a document, not just doing an attestation that they've read and understood it. So we'll talk definitely about that as well. But with the training, you are able to link to a document. You're just not able to link to the publication, the individual published version of a document. So just kind of giving you a little bit of background there. And we're going to start with our first idea here regarding a post-published document using a test for acknowledgement.
Yeah, and one last bit of housekeeping before we jump into that. We are, we're going to approach this particular episode a little bit more from the theoretical side with, how could you accomplish this depending on different scenarios. We will show you some settings for how to set it up, especially the important ones. But in general, we're really just going to focus on here's a scenario, here's how you could accomplish that using the product. If you need more help or guidance on how to specifically set those things up, then by all means reach out to us. And like we've said a couple of times, we thought through a lot of scenarios here. We actually cut a couple out because it was a little ridiculous at the end how many we had come up with. So
but ultimately, that's what we're trying to provide to you are some options depending on what your particular needs are. And, a different customer may have a different need. You may be one customer and want to use all of these different scenarios depending on, the needs that you have. So we just like to give options on all the things that you can do.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, let's get into our first scenario.
Okay, so we're going to start with talking about the post-publish document acknowledgement with the testing module. This is really more if you are just wanting a simple attestation, simple acknowledgement of a document, and the document has been published. So you want this to go out to your users. When the document gets published, they read it, they understand it. Maybe behind the scenes, they ask their supervisor if they don't understand it. And then all they're doing is saying, yep, I got it. And it's being marked for the records. And then you have easy records for showing your auditors as well.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the easiest of all to set up in a lot of ways. So we're starting with the one that is kind of designed out of the box in Qualtrics to just work. So you build it, you set it up once, and then it just does it every time. We're going to start here with this document. So in this scenario, our document is right here on the left-hand side, and it's just a fake document that we're needing to revise. And I've got a test that is associated with it. Okay. So once I publish this document, it's going to generate the test over here on the right-hand side for any user that needs to take the acknowledgement to go do that. Okay. So what that'll look like is you've got your document in edit. And you'll see that right there with my draft. I release it for approval. Of course, your changes made, if you're using track changes, would come in here. Otherwise, you're just going to tell us what that is. We're just demoing a test.
And while he's doing that, it's kind of cool just to notice that, yeah, there is a note up above letting you know that this is already associated with the test. So if this was more than an acknowledgement, or if you wanted to make this acknowledgement actually have some test questions, we're just talking, yes, no, that you've read it and understood it. But if you wanted to do it to be more specific, you could certainly do it. So this is a nice reminder to take you over to that test to make those changes. Otherwise, you can just check the box and say, yeah, I've made the necessary changes to this test, and then get it to the published state.
Yeah, exactly. And another key feature would be if you did not have a test associated with it, this isn't going to show up there. So if you were expecting for a test to go out and you don't see this, then you know that it's not associated, and it's not going to happen. So a nice little check there for both ways. If you do need to update the test, I usually just right click, open it in a new tab, and go update that there before anything else happens. So just something you can do there pretty easy. You would have to verify that it's ready to go. Changes made are ready, and I'm just going to release it and approve. I'm the only approver here. You guys know how this all works. So I'm just going to approve this and get it published so that you can see that test coming in. So you'll see that happen. Prepares our document, of course, like you would normally expect. We've got our new version down here. It's published today, right? Back in our inbox, we, of course, now get that brand new acknowledgement test that was associated with that, okay?
And we've already got this set up. So we're showing you from this, what a user would see essentially after the document has been published, and you've already got this configured the way that you want. But then we're going to backtrack and go back and actually show you what this test definition looks like from behind the scenes.
Yeah, so you could imagine you published that test a second ago, and now your users have, not the test, you published that document a second ago, and now your users have this brand new test that they have to take. And it's a simple one, right? All we care about is the attestation, so they're just going to mark that they've read and understand the changes. The benefit to a simple test like this is that if you're tying it to the document for every revision, you would want it to be generic so that you didn't have to update the test every single time you revise the document, right? So keeping it super generic means you build it once and it just keeps going every single time you revise that document. So this one, Mark, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and it's completely up to you. I like to make those just a single answer question, so you don't even have a no, allowing them to fail. But you might, instead of no, have, I need to talk to my supervisor or something like that. If you wanted them to quote unquote fail the test. But here we're looking for records that they, have read and understood it. So hopefully they're doing that kind of stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And you have they have the document that they can open right there on the same screen.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all there. I didn't show that new version was hyperlinked. It was during the test, and it is also there at the end. So they will be able to see it. There are some fun things you can do as well, because we keep that track changes version. If you would rather have the redlined version, the track changes version in the test, you can do that with some simple HTML. And if you have any interest in that, just reach out to Susie or I. We could show you how. It's pretty simple. But otherwise, the default will just be that final PDF that looks like this. Okay, so pretty simple, right? You have a document that is in edit. You publish that document, the test automatically goes with it. So a couple of things that you're going to have set up, and we'll show you that in the administration. The first thing, of course, is you have to have a document, right? So if you're creating a new document, you would bring it in, create that document, and have it in edit. That will start the whole process of being able to select it as part of the test. So you have to have the document made. And then once the document is made and in edit, you can create the test that accompanies that particular document. right? So you'll have to build both of those things. Um, let's go look now, Susie, if you want. Let's look at that
Yeah.
test so you can kind of guide us through some of these specifics that we'll want to.
Yeah. So one thing that's kind of helpful in here is the title. If you use kind of a naming convention to name your acknowledgements or your attestation, that's really helpful when you're reporting or even when you're looking for a test definition want to search for a test definition within your administration. That's just kind of a little helpful hint. But like Tim was talking about, that we can't link the document to the test until it exists. So you can come in here and create this, but you're going to have to come back to actually assign that document to it by clicking select and then, assigning the document to it. Once that document is in existence. So really having the document already in existence is your best way to go to start. And if you wanted to do this and you had your documents already auto published, it's fine. You can set this up at at any time, essentially, once your documents are in Qualtrics. And then this will just start the process of sending out automatically once the next revision comes out. So you could always do this manually at the beginning. Once, if the documents were all already in the system and you're coming and doing this later. But obviously we're talking about it, least amount of steps. You're bringing the documents in as edit, and then setting up this test. So where he's got his cursor right now, this is where you'd want to check that or select that radio button at the end with every published revision. You could do it with the next published revision only. So in the case where you did have very specific test questions maybe, but then, you're going to need to make that change later, because it's not going to go out with all your other published revisions. So checking that last radio option allows it to go out with all of them. Test intro, same thing, is gonna just have whatever instructions that you want in there, but that's where you're probably going to tell them, hey, make sure that you read and understood this. And like I was saying before, if you didn't want to have the yes or no options, you could just put in here, if you don't understand it, go to your supervisor before completing this test, something like that. We can go over the test takers tab and talk a little bit about assigning who you want to. So this is another place when people are first setting this up, the order of operations may trip them up a little bit. All you need to do is select your groups for your test takers and or it could be users, but select those groups. Add them to that table below, and then that's it. You do not need to send the test now. In fact, you don't want to send the test now. You don't want to check those or send the test now. That's going to manually send it. Instead, just make sure that your test is enabled, and then you would go back, and that's when you would publish the document that we just showed you how to do that. Then you would go and publish that document, or you just leave it now. And when your document gets published the next time, it's going to go out to whoever you've got in that test takers group.
Yep. Yeah, and of course the questions tab here is going to be the single question if you just got the I've read and understood, or it can have as many other additional questions as you want. So when we saw earlier when the document was an edit and I sent it for that approval, it was wanting us to edit and make sure. And when I opened that in a new tab, it gave us this definition page again, and had the chance to go update questions before we made that publish. So just a nice little check there in case you need to update what you're asking or any of the takers, you can do that before we ever get down the road of sending it and having to cancel and resend by ourselves.
And if you'll stay on that test takers tab, so kind of what I was mentioning before too, in the case, let's say that you've already auto published, hundreds of documents and you want to start this process today, for the next time all of those documents get published, then you would just come in here and create the test for each one of your documents. Once you had your question in there, and your test takers, make sure it's enabled. And then that's when you would come in here and click send test to. You would check the box for all the people you want to, if you wanted to manually send it, send test to and manually send it out to them, and then click send test now, and that will manually send it out to them at this time to take that on the latest version. And then that wouldn't alter the fact that it's still going to go out with the next published version each time it gets published to those same groups. But just two ways of kind of doing that if you already have your system set up versus you're just setting it up.
Yeah, so very, very quick recap. If you come in here, give it a title, standardize how you do it for quick access during reporting. Select your document, of course, have to pick that. It is only one document per test. And we'll kind of come back to that at the very end, but pick your document that you want this test for, send it with every revision, build your question, add your takers. Very last thing, make sure it is enabled. If this is not checked, you could have built the best test in the world. It won't go when you revise that document. So make sure you do that at the very end. And I'm going to close this, and let's go take a look now post after we do all of that, right? We've published it, we've taken it. We need to be able to report and pull data out. So what does it look like in this scenario? On the testing tab, and you guys can create reports or have your admins create those reports. On the testing tab is where we're going to mostly pay attention. You need to be able to run reports and grab that test data out if that's where your acknowledgements are going to sit. So I built a pretty quick one here, and I'm just going to run it without any filters and show you. You'll see how standardizing acknowledgement can be helpful to dig through what specifically is an acknowledgement and what's not. But then we've
sort by that, because you can sort by the title, or you can even use the title as a filter and just make sure the words acknowledgement is in there if you wanted to specifically call out just those ones that were for acknowledgement.
Yeah, and so we've got, in this one, I've got, of course, my instance IDs, right? We want to know what those are. Our title, the name of the person who took it, the status, document that they were tested on, and the revision that they were tested on. Key feature, if you notice some of these might be blank, like all these canceled ones, because they were never tested on it, because it was canceled, the document ID and the revision don't show up, right? Because that's linked to it's a past tense, they were tested. These were canceled before that, so you're not seeing those right there. There is a static field that will show just the document ID that's associated with the definition. You could use that instead of the tested, and it would show up all the time. But just a feature on reporting in case you didn't know why those weren't showing up. And then our completion date over here on the right-hand side. Filters are going to be your best friend here, though. You'll notice, like Susie mentioned with our title, if I know I'm looking for acknowledgements, I can search our titles for just part of that, and we'll just look at acknowledgement tests. Right, so that can be helpful. And then you can even dig further into only my, how about just my past ones, right? So just ones that have been passed. And then you could even dig into document IDs and people, right? So your filters, especially on the test results, are going to get you what you need.
And even using an incomplete on there can be helpful too if you're trying to find out who hasn't completed their acknowledgement test. And those are the ones that you might need to bug. But of course, you've also got email reminders to do bugging for you. But this then gives you a list of, kind of those stragglers who maybe have not completed that process yet. Or maybe they shouldn't have. And this just tells you, hey, I need to go cancel these so we don't have incompletes in here and everything is completed. So not kind of a little internal gap analysis before you're doing an audit to check on that everything has been done appropriately.
Yeah. So that's scenario number one. Pretty simple. You have a document that's in edit, and you're going to publish it. And on the publication, so post publish of the document, we get a acknowledgement test over here that we can complete and report on for document ID and the revision that they were tested on.
Okay, for the next scenario, we're going to talk about, again, still talking post-published documents. We're going to talk about using a training to make sure that there is an acknowledgement for a particular document. So the reason for this would be a little bit more than just an attestation or acknowledgement. Let's say you have something that's new and a new method or a new way of doing something, and you really want to make sure that your folks are actually trained on it prior to using that document. Or prior to completing that type of method or that type of work. So you want there to actually be a little bit more than just that attestation done. This would be a good way of handling that. The downside to this is that it is going to require that you manually send the training after the document is published, so it's not going to be an automatic. However, you still can do a test with it too, which we'll walk through, and Tim's going to kind of show you now how you would as the user complete this training, and then we'll circle back like we did with the test and look at the definition.
Yeah, so like Susie said, this is a little bit more manual. The training module is not hard linked to the document. So where the links happen with automation with the training is on the role, right, is on the group side. So you can automate trainings to groups, but you can't automate them to documents. So what it's going to look like for your user is actually just like any other training. So not tied to the document. We don't have a document here. You would just, after publish of a document, you would send your users the training that you need them to take. In this case, I'm doing it off of an equipment maintenance manual. So you'll see that here in my inbox. When I click into it, you'll see that we've got an update to that manual. This training's designed to provide those updates and to test me on them. And then when you're done, mark it complete so that you can take the test on that change. The manual is linked here, so they can go look at it, see the new one, whatever the changes were that were made to it, familiarize themselves with the updates. Even if you wanted to do an in-person training or whatever you needed to do, you could do that and have this sit in their inbox.
You could even have an HTML link in that description too, to take them out to like a training. If you had another training site, needed them to watch a video on something, maybe it's operation of a forklift or whatever it might be, they need to go watch this video or take a PowerPoint presentation or watch a PowerPoint presentation that lives in your Qualtrics system. That can be linked in that description as well for them to complete.
Definitely. When I'm done, I just mark this complete. That is going to immediately take me to take a test. And in this scenario, we didn't want just a simple attestation. So you'll notice when I hit yes, I've got a little bit more to do here, right? Because we wanted more of a training than just a simple, yeah, I get it. So this test, I know the answers. They're all A, so that I don't fail them and look bad on this.
Gotta make things easy for ourselves in demos.
I know. So I take my test. If I pass, that completes it. Of course, if you failed in this scenario, you could decide if you wanted them to retake it. The test can be a little bit more complicated here because you control it. I'm done now. That completes my training, but it does allow for the extra step of sign off. Which is that's part of the training module in general, right? You've got the user taking it and then 2 levels of sign off for completion and effectiveness. So for this one, we wanted to make sure that a supervisor got to review it. So we're giving it to the supervisor. They would, of course, see that data about when it was done. They would see the results of the test down here at the bottom and then would mark it complete or not. So pretty simple. It's going to work a lot like that other test. You're just giving them the data, they complete it, and mark the record, that I've completed it, take the test. So we do want to look at how you would set that up. I do want to mention one thing before we do that. When you're using the training module to do these types of acknowledgement tests, the only way that you can track revision numbers in a training is to associate a test with it. Okay, the training, when you report on it, and you'll see this in a little bit, the training will only report on doc ID itself. It doesn't track the revision that you're training them on. So if you need that revision number, which you're going to, you're going to need to associate a test with that training so that the test can report on it. Okay, just want to make that clear so that everybody knows. So Susie, why don't you walk us through this one?
Yeah, so again, just like with the test, when you have a training in the description, you will want to give them instructions, obviously, to what they need to be doing. But then this is where you could use that HTML to link to, and this is in the help guide. You can also reach out to us if you have questions about it. But you can link to, something that's outside of your system, like YouTube, or to something that is living inside of your Qualtrics system, like another document or a presentation. This is on top of the document that we're actually doing the attestation on. So you don't need to, let's say this was like the safety manual was changing, but you wanted them to watch a video on fire extinguisher use, then you could have the fire extinguisher usage might be its own document that you would link in here, but the safety manual is actually what they're being trained on here. So that's what you would link where it says associated document down below. Again, just like with the test, it's easier to create this training once you already have that document to associate, so you don't have to come in and out of here. Obviously, lots of other things that you can do to customize your training. We're not going to go into all of those necessarily, but the other thing that we want to point out is just that associated test. So it's grayed out because we already have those out right now active, but that's where you would be able to then associate it to a test, like Tim was mentioning, with lots of questions. Rather than just the acknowledgement, but however you wanted to do that, you could certainly do that.
Yeah,
Um,
and
yeah,
for
go for it.
that too, you need to make sure, and just to be clear, you have to build the training for this, and you have to build the test for this.
Yeah.
So I wasn't reusing an acknowledgement test that we had before. So let me show you here. I have a fully separate test than the one that we did before that's just on this one thing. This one is set up a little bit different. I'll show you this just because we're doing it. I'm not ever sending it automatically, right? Because you wouldn't want the training to be sent and this test and another test when they finish the training, right? That would be a little bit of overkill. So I'm never going to send this automatically. I'm just going to have the test send it once the test or the train. Sorry, I'm going to have the training send all these words. They're just big
Yes.
words. I'll have the training send it automatically once it is finished. It'll give me that test. So mark it never. You can still associate it with the correct ID. That's all good. But the training itself, if I can find my right tabs, is actually going to be what's driving the assignment of that test.
I think that's a really good point too, because so not just selecting the radio option for never in the test, but also not even manually sending that test or having that test expire. If you want this to truly be done with a published version of a document that's related to a training, then don't have your test itself expire. Don't have it sent automatically, and then don't come in here and go to the test takers and send it manually either, because again, they're getting it linked to the training. This makes it a lot easier for you because you're not having to send the training and then send the test. That's hugely nice. But it's just a reminder, you don't need to be resending it. That'll just kind of confuse things if you're trying to do that. So if
Yeah.
it's linked to a training and the training is, linked to a document being published and you're going to send it out for that, just send out the training, let it do its thing from that point, and don't do any manual work after that.
Yeah. Make sure it's enabled too, though.
Oh yeah, make sure
Yeah.
everything's enabled.
Because if it's not
And
turned on, it can't be sent. Yep.
and good call, the fact that, we do need to have, in when you're setting up the training in this particular situation, best to have the document already created and the test already created. That way, when you're coming in here to create the training, you already can associate it to a test that exists, and you can associate it to a document that already exists.
Yep.
Um, Other thing on this tab here is that completion sign off and effectiveness sign off. So again, if you want to have people signing off, you can do both levels or just completion, but it just kind of matters, how important is this that it gets checked before the person is technically, allowed to be using that document and the policy or procedure, work instructions, whatever it might be. The training attendees, just like the tests, you would assign it or you would decide who's going to be assigned to that. You can also mark a training as required or not required. And then in here, once this is enabled and you've got all your signed off personnel, and then the document gets published, that's when you would come in here and just check the send to for the appropriate groups and send the training. Another kind of cool thing about that is that you can stagger this too. So if you had this needed to go out to everyone, instead of using your all users, or if you had like an all employees option, instead of doing that, you could just break this out into different groups and, kind of stagger how you send those out. So just another option to throw out. And obviously with the sign off personnel, then you're selecting appropriate sign off personnel for, again, we're still doing somewhat of a document attestation here. So the sign off personnel may just be somebody from quality rather than the managers or some other group that you've got.
All right, so now let's go look at what it all means after, right? Because just like with the test, we got to figure out how we're going to show this data afterwards, right? So with the test, we ran simple reports, but having it as a training actually gives us a few other benefits other than just simple reporting. So the first thing is, because it is a training, it will show up under your profile as something that was completed. Right, so that equipment maintenance training, which was a new procedure training, will show that I'm current on it, right? And I could go into it and look at data there. This will also always show if I've got multiple, if we've got like 30 procedures that I use and they're all acknowledgements as trainings, it will show all of them as current here over time as I complete them. So really nice visual there. You can also get that on reporting on the system side. If we're wanting to run a matrix for everybody, you would get the same thing. So I could do all personnel, all of my trainings and acknowledgements, right? And you would want naming convention here too. But here I could show all of my acknowledgements, and that equipment maintenance one, you'll see only this user that I'm logged in as has completed, and this other one. Everybody else is just waiting, right? So you can get pretty simple little, data of who all is current and who isn't, just off of that one column. Outside of that, so, that's all current latest instance, right? So current revision, that's where we're at. If you need all of the trainings that have ever been sent over time, that's where this training column is going to come into play. We'll have the ability to run and create your own custom report. Here, like I mentioned, you're going to get custom data like we talked about with the test. You'll have the doc ID that it was associated with. And let me go down to where I just took it down here at the bottom. So the doc ID, even the test ID there to look at assigned and completed dates. I mentioned this before when we were talking about it, but the thing that you're missing out of this report is the document revision that it was tested on, right? That isn't going to show up here in this training report. In order to get that, you'll have to go to the testing side and look at the test report, right? Because that test is a separate thing in the system. I could go look at my testing report and see the version that I was tested on here, right? So because it's not automated, because it's not hard tied to the document, you've got a little bit more work to do, right? We're kind of bridging a gap here with this, with using this module. So a little bit more manual. You've got to manually send it to your users. You have to check in the testing for the version that they were tested or trained on, but you get some real key pickups on the reporting side with the matrix and with the data in your profile. Anything else you feel like could be added there, Susie, that you like for that version?
I think this is, yeah, I think this is really all that I would include. I think it's just, we didn't talk at all about, other ways that you would use trainings. This is really strictly just for the attestation or the acknowledgement of the document. So I think this is a good overview of what you guys would be looking to use, this kind of second layer or second level in maybe difficulty and also in getting additional processes through for your acknowledgement, a little bit more than just a regular acknowledgement for a document.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's keep on moving through. What do you say?
Yeah. All right, for the next scenario that we're going to talk about, now we're getting into the documents before they're actually published, that you need to have, this attestation or acknowledgement done by some users. So we're going to be talking, this first one is using the review functionality within document control. This one is not a replacement for any kind of competency or training. We're going to get into that in another. But this is, again, we're doing the order kind of least to most, training involved now that we're in the pre-published documents. In this case, because we're using reviewers, they're going to have permission to see these unpublished revisions. And you don't really need to add any different kind of security or anything like that. And this does stop the document from being published until it's been reviewed by everyone. So this is essentially having an effective date when that equals your published date. So once you do have this ready to go out to everyone as a published document, that is when it will be in effect, is the same kind of thing. So Tim's
Yeah.
now going to walk us through actually, how you would handle this from the document perspective.
Yeah, and honestly, this is one that over the years, we usually talk editing a document, publishing it, and then doing an acknowledgement test, and we normally talk that scenario out. This is actually one that over the years I like a lot more, just because everything happens within the document itself, right? So I've got this document, I have properties for the document, and I have data and information around that document with that history all living here. And in this scenario, all of it lives right here for you to see with the document, which is, it's pretty valuable in my mind. I kind of dig it. So what we're going to do is, well, of course, we have to have a document, and you can do this on creation. When you're setting up all of the properties associated with it, with approvers and reviewers, or you can set it up and alter this at any time under document properties on the document list tab. So to do this, we're going to pay attention to this tab, and we're going to look specifically at the reviewers tab. And what you're going to do is just put in a group or multiple groups of users, and they become reviewers. You can do them all together. Let me grab another group here. And the names here don't matter, so you can ignore those. They're just kind of placeholders. But you could do them together with the ones after, or in sequence with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So one group would get it before another group. So all you're going to do is set up the reviewers here, and let me remove this out. Then you just use the document control process. Before you send it for approval, though, I'm having trouble speaking now. Before you send it for that approval, you're going to send it to the reviewers for them to take a look at and comment. Okay.
And one kind of thing that's important to note here is, if you're using this method, that you would actually want to have, normally we use the review in Qualtrics for a final draft. So you're editing the document and then you're having it reviewed just to make sure everything is good before you're ready to then send it out for approval and then publish it. In this case, you need to have that sort of built in beforehand. So whether you have a different group that's reviewing it to start and then coming back and making changes to the document as needed, or having some kind of discussion or collaboration prior to that is really going to be important, because at this point you need to be sure that you're not going to be making any changes when you send this out to this group of reviewers, because this is not reviewing the document to make sure it's correct. This is them reviewing the document to make sure that they understand it before it gets published.
Yeah, exactly. So in that type of a scenario where you want to do a review before sending it, you would do like this, where you've got a director of quality first and then testing user second, or you could leave this as no, do one review with them. When you get it back to edit, switch them to yes, do a second review just for that finalize. So lots of possibilities with this, but in general, the column here is really just going to drive forward that whole pre-publish review portion. So once you have this set up and you've got the people that you need in that group, then you just work on the document, right? So it's going to look like this. If I make an edit, and I'm not going to go through a full edit. You guys know how to do the edits here. So we'll just say faking an edit for Susie. And then I'm going to edit later just to put that into edit in my inbox. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward and pretend that I did a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't actually do. And up here on actions, when we're ready for that pre-publish review for everybody to take a look and make sure they understand, we're going to go to actions and release for that review. Changes made would populate if you're using track changes. Otherwise, we'll say made some awesome edits for Susie.
I don't know why.
I don't know either. It's just, we're having fun. Release it for review, and it will then go to all of those people for them to take a look at. Okay, so you'll see that here, my edits awaiting review. We've got 8 people that currently have to do that. I could log out. Let's log in as my manufacturer here. And they would log in and see that document that's waiting on them, right? You could imagine that for any person, if it's an analyst or just one of your employees that has to do this, they would get that document, see it, get the draft version. You know, they're going to familiarize themselves with that. They have the track changes document here that they can look at to see red lines if they need. I didn't make any changes, so this is going to be blank. Well, I mean, it'll have content, but it's not going to have any changes. They can look at the red line version there. Even look at properties. They can see everything about the document that they need. Then their action is just to review it and provide comments back, right? And they could say something if they didn't understand it. They could provide a comment and you would see that. Or they can just say, looks good. Right, whatever you want them to say, maybe tell them to be professional here, because as you know, you can't edit these after. But write something, review it. That'll document in the document that I did my review. And this is where the benefit really starts to come in. Let me actually log back out to go back to my document.
And while he's doing that, this is a good place for some internal policies or procedures too. Like he was saying, you know, make sure that they understand that they should do something professional in here because this is going to be in the record. But also just for some rules around this too, making sure that obviously they understand that this is the way that they are acknowledging that they understand this document. So having some specific verbiage or something that you want them to put into that particular place to then help you, you know, with this process. Another piece in your policy or procedure that you'd want to include is, because review is not required as far as Qualtrics is concerned, the application allows you to skip review entirely, that you'd make sure that documents that needed this would have some kind of designation, or you'd have, make sure that your users would know, your editors would know which documents needed to go out in this manner for review, and wouldn't cancel the release for the review without, making sure that everyone who needed to review it had completed a review.
Yeah, exactly. So with mine, I've got this document, right? I sent it to people to review. I sent it to my employees. 2 of the 8 have finished it. That's another huge benefit. You can see it here and you can track it here without having to go to reporting or to go look at the document. You'll know where it's at. And if you click here, it'll take you to the properties down here to where you can watch it all come in as well. So some nice benefit, right? All of that review is happening here. It's in the history of the document. So when it comes time for assessments, for audits, and they want to see, show me where all of your employees who use this have reviewed it and acknowledged that they understand it, that's all going to be down here, right, with the document in the document history. And let me go back to my history tab. That'll be the same for all versions, right? So here's version 2, where we did a full review. Version 3, like she said, you can skip it. So version 3 doesn't have one. This one, though, version 4, we're going back with those acknowledgements here and just watching them come in. This is, of course, pre-publish. So 4 is not published yet, right? Over in the document tree, we're still only looking at 3. So the review all has to happen before we can move forward with publishing. Once all of my employees here finish, I can then release it for approval. Until if I've got people that aren't going to do it, or if we're just taking too long, I can always cancel this, and it'll say, which I'll just do it right now, need to move forward. That's not how you spell forward. There we go. Now, if I cancel that and bring this document back to me in the properties for it, you will see, who did and who did not review it, right? So it's going to be pretty plain there. The downside is you couldn't, of course, go back and just have somebody update their one record here. If you were going to do that, you'd have to send a new review out to that person, or you could always train them or send them a test over using a different module. But yep, all that history will be here. Once it's done, once the review is done, then you would release it for approval and do the publish of the document there, right? So now we've got pre-approval and then a post acknowledgement, publish date and effective date after people have said that they know those changes. So pretty useful for that scenario.
Yeah, so again, this is really no training is incorporated into this. This is just, the sign off from these users that they have read and understood it, and whatever other documentation you want to keep, like Tim was saying, whatever other information you want them to be talking about if they need clarification or help with it. But there's no actual training being done on this. This is just kind of a simple way to get these acknowledgements done prior to the document getting published.
Yeah. Also, I guess it should be mentioned just real quick since we're here. You don't just have to do this one time. You can do multiple reviews over and over and over. So if you get people that are saying things like this, and you need to, clarify something and then resubmit it, you can do that, and you just have multiple entries for that review. So just in case you're wondering that. And so, yeah, let's keep on moving with a couple more scenarios. Okay, so the last area that we want to focus on is using the workflow module to accomplish a lot of this in a more custom way. So whereas, documents and testing and training are all kind of pre-built in their own functionality, workflows are going to allow us to build it however we want to, and then kind of get a custom flow and custom content into how we want that to look. So we're going to demo a couple of ideas. Things to remember here is that one, workflows, of course, don't connect two different modules. So like I can't initiate a edit on a document from a workflow, and I can't initiate a training from a workflow. So, this is all going to be maintained within the workflow module itself, and some of the other actions will still have to take place outside of it. So think more process based instead of, a fully integrated across the whole product thing. The second is that, of course, the reporting on this is going to be pretty custom as well. So it's all about just figuring out what you need to track and who needs to do it, and then building a process around that. So we are going to show you a couple of options with this, and I'm going to switch us back over. Here we go to our system. And right now, Susie is going to take over and show us one way to do this.
Okay, so we're going to start with looking at a workflow that we've already created, and we're going to walk through a couple of things on here. This is just a very basic shell of a workflow. We don't have a lot of things in here. We just wanted to be able to show you some basic information and get the point across, and then you can, of course, customize this workflow however you need it. And this can be for those documents that have been published already, and you want this to happen, this kind of a higher level training to happen, more of a competency essentially to happen after the document's published, but before these individuals are allowed to be using it. Or you can do this even pre. So I'll kind of talk about the differences there. So the first thing here is just selecting a date it needs to be completed by, and then selecting the document to review. So if you're doing this and it's already been published, then it's really simple to just, include the document that you want them to be reviewing that is going to be part of this training. And when they're looking at it, they can look at the current published revision of it. If, however, you want to do this before the document has been published, then you can do it a couple of different ways. One, you can give them instructions, kind of like we've got here, just about going to the document itself and opening the unpublished new revision. The downside to this is that you would have to have that permission given to everybody so that they could see unpublished new revisions. The other way to do this without giving that permission out would be to just download the Word version, the native format of whatever this document is, and you can do that with the track changes on as well. And then instead of having this as a document field, you can do it as an external file field and then just upload that actual Word file for them to review. So you're saying, here's the file I need you to review. And then the next thing that you're going to be doing is assigning who actually needs to be doing the review and providing evidence of their completed training. And like Tim said, you can't link trainings to the workflow, but you could also always include, a step in the workflow where you're actually saying, now go assign the training to the individuals or something along those lines if you wanted to do it through a training. But we, again, just made this bare bones. So this is essentially just assigning the individuals or listing what individuals you want to assign this to.
Yeah, and Susie, we get a lot of people while you're doing this.
Yeah.
We get a lot of people that ask, I've got a lot of temporary workforce or a lot of turnover, and I don't want to have like a lot of user licenses and stuff for people that are going to be changing in a lot. So we see workflows used a lot of times where you're giving it to a single supervisor, and then that person is documenting training for their entire employee base. Workflows work really great for that because you can give it to the supervisor, they attach like a sign-in sheet back, and then have it completed. So just another scenario where it might be helpful.
Absolutely. So while Tim was talking, I just I clicked the button to the route to launch the workflow. And so I already had this again set up. It launched a just simple kind of task assignment workflow. So you'll see the original, the document acknowledgement and training workflow that I was using at the beginning, and the document that we're reviewing. And then I've got my 3 assignments. So another, difficulty with this is that you are going to get these, they're not going to automatically be assigned to those 3 individuals that I put in the sub form. We are going to have to assign those. So as QA, I just have this kind of coming back to me as the QA person. So then I would go into these different instances and actually list out who the assigned employee is. So I would select the person and then the supervisor who might be responsible for that. So let's just pick somebody and then click assign. And let me actually do that with Daniel as well. So again, I'm just looking at this area up above and then selecting the appropriate person or people and then assigning it. So now as QA, I've assigned 2 out of 3 of those. So let's go. We're going to log out as me and log back in as Daniel. Daniel's one of the ones who has that assignment. And now we can see that we've actually got that task assignment in here. So if I click on this, just built it out so that now the same subform is being shown, but Daniel's seeing some more information. He's also seeing, again, what we provided for him before, his due date to complete this training, his document that he needs to review. You might also have whatever that training is linked in here or as a separate training, however you wanted to provide that actual training for him. We're just not including that in here, but this is probably where you would want to do that. So then the employee, Daniel, is saying when he actually reviewed the document, and this particular example is post-publish, so he would be looking at the current published revision instead of the edit version that you might want him to see. And then he is attaching some training evidence, and I'll let you actually, Tim, do that since this is
sure.
on your computer. So go ahead and
See what
attach
happens.
something before I go looking all
I think
over.
I've got some blank. Here we go. There's
Perfect.
a blank
Thank you.
document. There you go.
And then Daniel could, of course, write in some comments about, the training or the document, but this one was not required. And then this would go, we've got this set up so it would just go out for the supervisor to review. And at that point, they've got some additional fields to fill in for that supervisor. So go ahead and log out there. But the idea being, go ahead and will you log in as Alice on here? Do you know Alice's?
If I knew what Alice's login was,
Don't worry about it. Let's just do me again.
it.
So, bad choice in who I chose to be the supervisor in there, but the idea is then the training supervisor would get the workflow, and then they would be able to put in their information and the date. So they could essentially sign and date that this training was completed after they looked at the training evidence that was on here. So kind of just taking it full circle, allowing for a little bit more of a competency. Obviously, whatever competency that you're truly doing would probably make up the middle of this workflow between the person reviewing the document and then the supervisor actually reviewing that the training was complete. But we skipped that just for time's sake, and everybody's competency needs are going to be different in how you want to handle that.
Yeah, and the key point here is there's a lot of things that are possible, right, within a workflow, and you've shown a real quick example with just a few fields and routing it from person to supervisor, then back to a QA person. And you're using data copy at the end, right, to compile everything back.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we went back to, once this is all completed, when we go back to that initial workflow, we would then be able to see everybody's, the process of everyone's state of that workflow.
Yeah, and that's data copy works. It's an automation, so it's going to copy everything once they're all done. So like that one that Daniel was doing doesn't show up here yet because it's not finished, right? So, and that's the cool part about workflows is it's all you build it how you want it, and you can kind of be custom with what you want it to do and track. Like I mentioned, we've got some people who use this instead of giving it to individuals like this. They'll give it to a manager, and then you could imagine the manager giving the date that they had their meeting, the sign-in sheet, comments, and then, skipping the supervisor part and just giving it back to the head of the company. So,
And the nice thing about this too is, if you're doing it in this subform way, we could have even had the data copier happening before it went to the supervisor, and so you would see Daniel's information in here before it actually went to the end, and that way we can see this through the inbox. But if I just click on this one document acknowledgement, then in the inbox I would see which document they were actually doing the acknowledgement and training to, but then I could see where we were in the status. So if I had that data copier happening in multiple places, then I might be able to see, where it had Daniel already reviewed it. Was it just waiting on the supervisor and things like that? And I can see how many of the people have completed that task versus have not. So a lot of visibility to the process, especially when you've got lots of people who are assigned to complete the training for a particular document that they're reviewing.
yeah. We do have, I'm going to take back over
Yep.
here for a second. We do have a best in class workflow that has some of this built into it as well. And I have to remember where I did this at. Was it that login? So let's try another one. Essentially what we have, and here I've got that one set up. With the best in class, we have a change order workflow that takes you through a whole change process. Right. Sometimes, some of your document requirements need a more robust kind of start to finish process tracking than what the document control module has currently. Right. You might need requesting changes to documents before they happen. Right. Because with our document tree, you just click edit, start making a change, and send for approval. So if you ever need a pre-approval to even start a change, this change order workflow can work pretty well for that. And it's designed to track the whole process through it. And I'm bringing it up because as part of it, you'll see I'm kind of in the middle of this process here on implementation. But you'll see that it includes a portion to do that employee training portion, and then put the change into effect and complete out the whole thing. So you'll probably notice that it looks very similar to what Susie already built. It's got the change, a description, any affected documents. So here we're doing multiple. And the cool part is because we're doing it pre-change all the way through to post-change, you can see both the revision when it was originally attached before anything changed. And then now that it's published, we've got the current version both attached together. You could even drop in supplemental documents and then things like justification, impacts, who needs to be in the review, and all of that. At the end, at this step that we're at, when we move it forward, you'll notice that we're going to a training step, and we're basically filling out that same information, right? We've already got documents picked here, but then we need some notes about what we need, the date that everything will be completed, employees that we need to train, and we can drop them in as groups, people, however you want that to look, and then details about how you want that, right? So if we're doing a group meeting, maybe we just want everybody to sign in on a sheet and attach that back. When we go to that step, it's going to be pretty similar to what you just saw, right? The date that it was completed and the training evidence. Again, we're keeping these pretty simple, especially on the best in class side, so that it works for a broader audience. But you guys can edit and customize and add in any other features that you might want to see there. So just wanted to point out a couple of opportunities there. In general, they're all going to be pretty similar. It's just, how do you want them to interact with it? How do you want the evidence to look at the end? And then in what part of the process do you want it to come in? If you do want any further guidance on those two, just reach out to us, because I know workflows can be complicated and your ideas or your needs might be a little different than what you're seeing here. So by all means, contact us if you want some help on those two. Anything else you'd add there? I guess I would say, reporting on this is just going to look like other normal workflow reporting, right, Susie? There's nothing. Yeah. I mean, it's all going to be handled within this instance.
Yeah, and and for this one, since you don't have any launches going out of it, I think that's definitely the case for anything where you have some of those launches, like we were talking about with the data copier. The purpose of the data copier is not just for, the ease of use while you're in the workflow itself, but also for the reporting. So that way you don't have to look in those individual instances when you're trying to report on, everything that happened from the individual instances that were launched out of those subforms. So definitely utilize that so that you're not creating a whole bunch of different reports for it.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, let's just summarize that all up pretty quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we kind of went over some of the different things that you can do post-publish, and a lot of those are, the somewhat simpler way because they're expecting, or the way that the product is built with your documents already published. So the acknowledgement test, using tests to send out an acknowledgement with every published version of a document, and then doing a training on a particular document where you can manually send out a training that is linked to a document for them to complete, and also might even have a test associated with it with specific questions.
Yeah, and then pre-publish, of course, document review. So just utilizing the document control cycle itself, putting groups in there and sending it to them before we ever go through that approval step. So it can be very, very easy, right? And the benefit is that it's all with the document and not in any other module. And then, of course, at the end, custom workflows, right? All three of those previous required users in the system for you to assign things and track it through that login. If you ever need something outside of that, if we're, having a supervisor document for staff, workflows are the best for that. Or if we just want a fully custom thing because these aren't exactly what you're looking for, right? Then we would go to that workflow.
Yeah, bottom line here is that you can have a lot more configuration with the workflows. You can incorporate a lot of different pieces together. So we just looked at, doing a full change requests from beginning to end, but you could of course break that up into different segments. You could do like kind of what I was showing with the, just doing a competency on one area of it, or what Tim was just mentioning too about, supervisor filling in a training was completed with 20 different people, and attaching a sign-in sheet, for example. So just a lot of different options that you have with the workflows that you can be thinking of. Just kind of, if you're not as familiar with the workflows, it's easy not to think about those. But if you've ever talked with Tim or me about the product, then we are usually going to be talking about workflows because that's what we have the most fun with.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing we will show is some of these ideas. And Susie, I think you deal with these the most, so I'll let you kind of talk through the process of how we handle ideas
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah, so we listed out some of the things that, during this that we were kind of talking about. There were some places where we feel like it would be easier to work in areas of the product when you had some of these features. So we just kind of listed these out for you. If you're interested in any of these, you can contact our support team, and there's the email address for you to contact, and they'll vote on your behalf. So you can just let them know, hey, I'm interested in this idea about adding ability to set a training to be sent with new document revisions. So that kind of in line with having trainings automatically sent out with a new published version like you can with tests. So you can even tell them that ID number 2732 and just email them at that support@qualtrics.com and let them know you want them to vote for you, and they'll put a proxy vote on there.
Yeah, and we talked about a lot of ideas, and we even mentioned a lot of areas where there are limitations, right? Like one that I specifically mentioned, well, two that I'll mention are the ability to add multiple documents to a single test, right? Because right now, every acknowledgement test is one test to one document, and so we hear this a lot, and we would get customers who would like to see that in the product. And the best way for you to get those in is to let support know that you're interested in that. So that is idea 651 right there in the middle. The other one we saw right at the end, Susie mentioned it, is that when you assign people in a subform and you launch those subform rows out, you then have to go manually assign the workflow to those users in the new instance, because the workflow engine can't look to the subform for that responsible party. So idea at the very bottom, idea 639, is to allow the system to look at that subform and automatically assign it to remove that step. So some other ones here, read through them. If you feel like that's something that you would love to see in the product, email support, let them know which idea or ideas, and get it documented so that we know that you guys are interested. Last thing, ideas, right, Susie?
Yeah, we want more ideas from you guys. So please email this email address, account-management@qualtrics.com, and let us know your ideas. This is how we come up with what we want to talk about in these Quiz the Whiz. So we really look to you guys again to hear your pain points, whatever things we can help you solve. If we talked about things, even in here, and you really want us to expand on something, this is the opportunity for you to get some, free learning essentially. So please send us some of your ideas, be as specific as possible in what you're looking to accomplish or what your pain point is, and we can kind of take it from there and look at solutions and best practices, and pick from those ideas that come from people. So yeah, again, send us some topics. Account-management@qualtrics.com.
Yep. And Susie, thank you very much. It's been fun.
Tim,
And
thank you very much.
yeah, we'll see everybody next time. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.